I always believed that betrayal had a sound. The slam of a door, the hiss of a lie, the snap of a heart breaking. But when it finally happened to me, it was silent, eerily, devastatingly silent. My name is Lena. I'm 39, a mother, a wife, and until recently, I thought I had a fairly typical life. My days were spent juggling a part-time job, managing the house, and caring for my son, Aiden, who had just turned 17. He wasn't mine by blood, but by heart. My husband, Robert, had full custody after his ex disappeared overseas, and I stepped into the role of mother when we married 8 years ago. We were a picture-perfect family to the outside world. Weekend barbecues, Christmas portraits, polite smiles in public. But within our four walls, the air had started to change. Robert had grown cold, distracted. Our conversations became mechanical, the intimacy extinct. I told myself it was a phase, a lull, that all marriages go through this. Aiden, on the other hand, had grown distant too, but in a different way. More withdrawn, more secretive. I chalked it up to adolescence. He was polite, even affectionate at times, but often kept himself, headphones in, door closed. I respected his space. Maybe I shouldn't have. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd left work early, headache, exhaustion, some excuse that barely convinced even me. I just wanted a long bath and maybe a nap before Robert came home. The house was unusually quiet when I walked in. I assumed Aiden was at school. His bedroom door was ajar, and I paused only briefly before walking past it toward the stairs. That's when I heard it.
A sound.
A breath, maybe. A low, stifled noise that didn't belong to an empty room. Curious, then cautious, I turned back. I nudged his door open gently, and what I saw stopped me cold. My son, shirtless, on top of someone. I couldn't see her face, not at first, but the curve of her waist, the color of her hair, it hit me before the full picture did. It was her, my best friend.
Tanya.
I don't remember how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? My body froze, but my mind screamed. I backed away like I'd touched fire, heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. I slipped out of the room, down the stairs, and out the front door before anyone noticed I'd been home. On the sidewalk, I couldn't breathe. I sat on the curb, shaking, unable to cry, unable to scream. Just still. That moment rewrote everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and motherhood. And it was only the beginning.
I didn't sleep that night.
I lay beside Robert, staring at the ceiling while he snored softly next to me, utterly unaware that our world was collapsing. The same man who used to trace circles on my back until I drifted off now felt like a stranger sharing my bed. I kept replaying the scene upstairs. Aiden's bare shoulders, Tanya's unmistakable laugh, their bodies intertwined in something far more than a mistake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag Tanya out by her hair and demand answers. But most of all, I wanted to understand how we got here. Where had I failed? Had I ignored too many signs? The next afternoon, I waited until Robert left for work and knocked on Aiden's door. He answered, eyes tired, lips tight. "We need to talk," I said, and he nodded without a word. We sat in the living room. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just looked at him, and somehow that was worse. "I know," I said quietly. His face dropped, the last trace of bravado melting away. His lips trembled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." I asked him how long it had been going on. He hesitated, then answered, "Since spring. 4 months. 4 months of lies. Of her smiling in my kitchen, sitting beside me at lunch, texting me memes while sneaking into my son's room behind my back. I didn't ask how it started. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Why? I finally managed. He shook his head. She was just there. I don't know.
She listened to me.
She made me feel like I mattered. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I've always listened. But she wasn't judging, he said, eyes full of guilt. You still see me as a kid. She didn't. I felt like I was drowning in a conversation I'd never prepared for. My best friend had seduced my son. My son had betrayed me. And worse, They both seemed to think they were in control of something that was clearly spinning into ruin. I told him to go upstairs. I needed time.
Space. Sanity.
And then I did what I hadn't planned to. I went through Robert's phone. Not out of suspicion. Not at first. I just needed something to distract me. But the passcode was the same as always, and once I unlocked it, I couldn't look away. There were messages. Dozens. Photos. Conversations with someone named Candace, someone named Layla. Not just flirty exchanges. These were full-blown affairs. Booked hotels. Voice notes. Miss last night already. Texts sent the morning after our anniversary. The walls didn't just crack. They crumbled. Everyone I loved had chosen someone else over me. My husband. My best friend. My son. But something inside me refused to fall apart. I closed the phone, wiped my tears, and stood in front of the mirror. If they could betray me so easily, I could survive without them just the same. For 3 days, I moved through the house like a shadow. I smiled when necessary. I cooked dinner. I answered questions. I even laughed at Robert's dry, half-hearted jokes. But inside, something sharp had taken root, a cold clarity that burned hotter than grief ever could. I had loved these people. I had sacrificed for them. And they had torn me apart without a second thought. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to become the calm before a storm they'd never see coming. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I backed up the messages from Robert's phone and sent them to a hidden email. I printed photos, screenshots. I went into our shared computer and found saved logins. There were entire folders of Robert's hidden life. One labeled Work Files was full of pictures of women I'd never met. The audacity didn't even shock me anymore. Then there was Tanya. She tried to call me the next day. I let it ring. Then again. I didn't answer. Finally, she left a voice message. "Lena, please? I didn't mean for it to happen. Can we talk?"
Talk.
I saved the recording. What haunted me more than her betrayal was my son's face. The guilt, the confusion, the way he looked at me like a child again, terrified of what he'd broken. He avoided me now. I let him. He needed space. I did too. But I couldn't forget what he said. She listened. She didn't judge me. When had I stopped being a mother he could confide in? Was I so busy being everything to Robert that I had failed Aiden without even realizing? Still, I couldn't let sympathy blind me. What happened was wrong, deeply wrong, and no matter what part of him I still wanted to protect, there were consequences. For all of them. I met with a lawyer quietly, an old college friend who owed me a favor. I brought him the printed texts and photos. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back and said, "You have more than enough. You'll walk away with everything, if that's what you want." I nodded. Then I planned the dinner. I invited Tanya, Robert, and Aiden to eat together, just like old times. No one suspected a thing. I even set the table with the fancy dishes, made roast chicken, poured wine. Tanya smiled like she'd missed me. Robert kissed my cheek and called me babe. Aiden barely spoke. Halfway through the meal, I stood up, walked to the TV, and plugged in the USB. The screen flickered to life. Screenshots. Messages. Photos. Tanya's voice note. One by one. No sound. No warning. Just the truth, on full display. They stared in horror. Tanya dropped her glass. Aiden's eyes welled. Robert's face turned to stone. I didn't say a word. I just watched them squirm. And for the first time in weeks, I felt whole.
No one spoke for a long time.
The silence at that dinner table was heavier than screams ever could be. Tanya stared at the floor like a child caught stealing. Robert stood halfway out of his chair, too stunned to speak. And Aiden, my boy, just looked at me with eyes so full of shame I almost couldn't bear it. Almost. I took my seat again, slowly. No tears. No breakdowns. I looked each of them in the eye and said calmly, "You all made your choices. And now I'm making mine."
I didn't wait for them to speak.
I didn't need apologies. There was nothing they could say that would uncut the roots of betrayal already rotting beneath our family tree. That night, Tanya left in a storm of sobs and humiliation. Good. Let her grieve what she destroyed. Robert didn't follow her. He just sat on the edge of the bed, defeated. When he finally opened his mouth to speak, I stopped him with a single word. Don't. The next morning, I handed him divorce papers. His hands trembled as he read them, but he didn't argue. He knew better. I had everything: proof, legal backing, financial records. It would cost him, and I intended it to. We agreed he'd move out by the end of the week. I wanted a clean break. No drawn-out drama. The house was mine now. So was the silence, and I welcomed it. Aiden was the hardest. He stayed locked in his room for 2 days after the dinner. I left him alone. On the third day, he knocked on my door. He looked smaller than I remembered. His voice cracked when he spoke. I'm sorry, Mom. I messed everything up.
I didn't yell.
I didn't hug him either.
You need help, I said.
And space. I can't give you either right now. He cried, but he nodded. A few days later, he left to live with his biological mother's sister in another state, someone I knew would set boundaries and get him therapy. Before he left, I gave him a note. It read, I still love you, but love doesn't erase damage. Earn back trust with time, not words. I don't know if he'll ever come back. I don't know if I want him to, but I left the door open for now. As for me, I found a small place by the sea a month later. I painted, I read, I sat in silence without feeling empty. Some mornings I cried. Other mornings, I smiled at nothing in particular. Healing isn't beautiful, it's brutal and slow, but it's mine. People say betrayal breaks you, but they never talk about what happens after. After the wreckage. After the silence. After you realize that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning.